If you're in the market for a compact family SUV, it's safe to say you have got plenty of choice. One of the main players within this segment is of course the Ford Kuga. This is the second generation Ford Kuga, and it was launched with the aim of basically providing a little bit more space and refinement than the previous gen. So if you're after a family SUV that ticks every box, is that the Ford Kuga? Well, we will find out in this need to know used car review.
On its launch in 2012, the second generation Ford Kuga picked up where its successful predecessor left off as a road-biased, family-friendly SUV that delivers a good blend of comfort and capability. To try to keep up in the highly competitive compact SUV segment, the second-gen Kuga benefited from an upgrade in cabin quality and space. Ford's Sync infotainment system was introduced alongside advanced safety features such as active park assist and the blind spot information system. A rear view camera also became available. In 2016, the Kuga was facelifted with both the styling and interior layout improved upon, and that's what we'll be looking at today. The facelifted lineup mirrors that of the Ford Focus in terms of trim, so it comprises Z-Tech, Titanium, ST-Line and Vignale trim levels. Standard equipment is generous across the range, with entry-level Z-Tech offering 17-inch alloy wheels, a DAB radio, air conditioning, cruise control and Ford's Sync 3 system, which includes sat-nav, Android Auto and Apple CarPlay connectivity. Titanium brings dual-zone climate control, rear parking sensors, automatic lights and wipers, and also part leather seats. ST-Line models get a sportier look with 18-inch alloy wheels, a sporty body kit, sport suspension, and a self-parking system. Top of the range is the luxurious Kuga Vignale with special styling tweaks, 19-inch alloys, a 10-way adjustable electric driver's seat, leather upholstery, and also a leather top dashboard. Pre-collision assist with autonomous emergency braking and a lane keeping aid with lane departure warning is also standard across the range. The Ford Kuga offers a strong selection of petrol and diesel engines to suit a variety of needs. Initially, the Kuga came with a 1.6 litre petrol engine, but this was replaced in 2016 by a more efficient 1.5 litre EcoBoost engine that's available in 150 and 182 horsepower variants. The 182 horsepower version is paired with an automatic gearbox only. Also introduced in 2016 was a 1.5 TDCi diesel engine, which, though relatively small, provides adequate power for most drivers. There are also a variety of 2-litre TDCi options to choose from, and you can pick between a 6-speed manual or dual-clutch automatic gearbox with most of the engine choices. Four-wheel drive is not available across the entire Kuga range though. It's only available in the more powerful 1.5 litre EcoBoost petrol engine and the 180 horsepower 2 litre TDCi diesel. We would recommend that you go for that 180 horsepower diesel if you are going to be towing.
Let's talk about the interior of the Ford Kuga. In this ST-Line trim, it's probably best to start with the seats. The seats have got some nice red stitching around them. It's a mixture of leather and Alcantara, and they're very comfortable and actually easy to get comfortable in. There's plenty of adjustment. The same can be said for the steering wheel, which has good rake and reach. So it's very easy to get comfortable within the Ford Kuga, I think, no matter which shape and size you are. With regards to build quality, it's a mixed bag, but that's what you'd expect from what is ultimately a family car. Everywhere that you can kind of touch and see is a nice material. Lower down the car, there's more hard plastics in the areas where you would expect that are going to take a bit more of a beating in family life. You'd probably describe the setup as quite steep, if that makes sense, because you have the infotainment screen up here, and immediately below you've got the climate controls and then the gear stick. But what I will say is that everything's kind of quite easy to use. The buttons are all large and easily marked, and it's always nice to have climate controls that are not buried in a menu inside a screen somewhere. You have a 12-volt socket here next to the electric handbrake. You've got a couple of cup holders. There's a glove box that has a couple of USB ports as well, and then you've got space for a bottle in the door bin. So there's plenty of storage and practicality in the front of the Kuga. Now this car is designed for family life, and what I will say in this particular model that's 5 years old, it seems to have stood up to family life quite well. With a used family car, it's always worth checking that everything works as it's supposed to. So make sure that the climate controls work properly, make sure that the electronic handbrake works as expected, check the glove box, and just, you know, give it a once over to make sure it's not been abused. In the rear of the Kuga, there is actually a decent amount of space. Now, I'm just under 6'2". The driver's seat is in my position where I would ordinarily have it, and I have got lots of knee room as it happens. And if I sit up nice and straight, I've also got plenty of headroom as well. So I could be quite comfortable in the back of this car for a prolonged period of time. The only slight complaint I would have is that the seats are actually a little bit narrow, so I think it would be very difficult to stick 3 adults across the back. We do have ISOFIX points on both of the outside seats, and the doors open relatively wide, so it's fairly easy to move a child seat in and out of the rear of the car. You also have in the centre here an armrest that also doubles up as a cup holder, but that does mean if you've got cups or bottles in there, it's no longer an armrest, but there's plenty of vehicles like that. We don't have any USB charging points in the back of the Kuga, but we do have a 12-volt socket, so you could easily put a double charger in there and charge 2 devices at the same time. Looking at the boot of the Kuga, well, it's much improved on the Mark 1, which really was wanting in terms of boot space. It's around 460 litres, which is a good 150 less than a Volkswagen Tiguan, but in real terms it doesn't actually feel it. It feels like quite a large usable space. There's barely any load lip to get over when you're lifting items in and out, and it's a nice big square boxy shape. Where it does fall short, I would say, is just in terms of features. There's a couple of lashing points, but there's no netting, there's no dividers, so you can't really keep loose items in place. On the go, the Kuga is pretty much what you'd expect from a Ford. Ford have been known for producing vehicles such as the Focus and the Mondeo, cars that handle surprisingly well. And I think the Kuga's no different, really. Given that it's a family SUV, it's actually quite nicely balanced, as it happens. The steering's nice and responsive. There's a lot more feel and precision than I was expecting. It's quite pleasant actually to steer, and this squishy steering wheel is, well, I don't know if I like the squishy steering wheel or not. I imagine over many miles having a soft squishy steering wheel will be quite nice. But yeah, right now it's going to take some getting used to. It's obviously not the quietest place to be. I think you'll find a VW Tiguan will probably be a bit more quiet and refined on the move. And the engine obviously is not giving outright performance, but it is peppy enough. And this manual gearbox that we've got here today is actually really quite nice to use. Once again, another pleasant surprise. I was expecting it maybe to be a little bit leggy and long, but it's not. It's quite short and sharp, and very, very slick to use. It's worth bearing in mind that if you go for the automatic version of the Kuga, so if you get a power boost gearbox, there have been some issues with the power boost gearboxes in the past, so it's worth checking the service history of the car to make sure that the auto box has been serviced when it's supposed to. And yeah, just come off the roundabout there, and it was actually just really nice. I'm really pleasantly surprised by how nicely this thing drives actually. And you feel quite raised up. Obviously it's an SUV, you feel like you've got that raised ride height, but it doesn't feel that you're high and wobbly. It actually feels quite nicely balanced. That's the word I'll come back to again. I just think the Kuga feels surprisingly well balanced to drive. And given the size of the Kuga, it doesn't feel too big to manoeuvre around town. So if you're doing the school run, going to the supermarket, if you're parking a multi-storey car park, it's actually really kind of manoeuvrable and easy to use. I just think that cars in this class generally are just a good size. They just kind of give you a little bit of everything. No, you're not going to have the most space, but you've got enough space. The one complaint I do have actually is the armrest down here is a bit low. So I understand why. It's in a good position for the manual gearbox, but if I was on the motorway doing a long journey, I actually quite like the armrest in the Tiguan because that is adjustable. You can raise it up, and therefore you can have your elbow a bit higher just so you can keep two hands on the steering wheel whilst you're cruising along. Now, I will say that the Kuga has aged relatively well. Not the infotainment system. I will say that the dash setup and the infotainment system does feel very dated, although it is nice to have these physical buttons down there. So in terms of how well the Kuga has stood up to the test of time, shall we say, because once again we're looking at a used car here, I would say quite well. And yeah, I just think it's actually stood up really quite well. And I think when you add that into the styling, which I think the Kuga's still a good looking car, especially in this ST line trim. I think it's a used car purchase that you don't feel like, dash and infotainment system aside, that you're getting an old car. I think it still looks and feels quite modern. And then when you throw that into the fact that it's actually surprisingly fun to drive, I think it's a good all-rounder, the Kuga. I really do quite like it, actually. I think it's got a bit of character, shall we say. That's probably the best way to put it. It's a family SUV that's maintained a bit of character in its age. With this second generation Kuga, Ford looked to build upon the success of the first gen and improve. So this is a more spacious and practical family SUV than its predecessor. It's also surprisingly good fun to drive and relatively comfortable inside. Of course, the infotainment is a little bit dated, but it's practical and easy to use. If you're in the market for a family SUV, I would certainly say to consider the Ford Kuga. If you're looking for something that's a little bit more premium and refined, then maybe look at the Volkswagen Tiguan, but the Ford Kuga really isn't that far behind. Thanks for watching this need-to-know used car review of the second generation Ford Kuga. If you enjoyed the video, please give us a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel and hit the bell icon so that you're notified every time we upload a video.